always re-emerging no matter how many times it got invaded or conquered. This documentary will delve deep into where Persia comes from and what made it so successful and unique among the world's great civilizations. The area of modern-day Iran in historical Persia has been inhabited since early prehistory. It also saw some of the earliest agricultural villages in 7200 BC, notably Choga Golan and Choga Bonut, in the Zagros mountain in the west of the region and forming the western border of modern-day Iran. We know from these sites that wild barley, lentils, and various legumes were cultivated. We also found a 7,000-year-old jar of wine, now on display at the University of Pennsylvania. The culture of the region has been deeply intertwined with one of Mesopotamia, or current-day Iraq. One of the first cities, the Sumerian city of Uruk, is considered to have extended eastward, creating the city of Susa in 4395 BC, or maybe even earlier. The city of Susa would become the capital of Elam, the very first defined nation in what would become Persia. It would stay an important economic and trade center until its destruction by the Mongols some 5,500 years after its foundation. Instead of a modern nation-state, Elam was most likely a coalition of different people and tribes living in the mountain. Elam was the name given to them by the Mesopotamian civilization, and they most likely called themselves something like Haltami, or those of the high country. This defined characteristic of the Persian people, the people of the mountain, would stay, and it would contrast the people of the plain to the west in modern-day Iraq. The two would often fight, and at times, dominate each other. The rough terrain was not suitable for the irrigation-heavy type of agriculture practice in the plain, so life was most likely structured around semi-nomadic pastoralism, with small-scale agriculture in a limited area along the bottom of the valleys. This made for less numerous but also rougher, hardier people than the more sophisticated farming culture of the plain. So in many ways, the Iraq-Iran conflict in the 80s was just the last episode in a 6,000-year-long conflict between the plain people and the mountain people, and who would dominate the area. Little is known about Elam's everyday life, because we're still not able to translate their writing, which started from around 3200 BC. The Elamite language, now extinct, seems to have been a completely different language from any other from the region. However, progress has been made recently to decipher Elamite writing, so we might soon learn a lot more about them. A unique feature of Elam's culture was a focus on animals in their art, especially dogs and bulls. This was very different from the Sumerians, Akkadians, or Egyptians, who favored human or animal-human hybrid figures. Elamite art indicates a polytheist religion, with a strong focus on nature and a mother goddess, with rituals done in sacred groves or mountains. This was also a very tolerant religion that tolerated the gods of its neighbors and even progressively incorporated them into the Elamite pantheon. Some aspect of their religion was passed upon to later religion in Persia, notably Zoroastrianism. For example, using elevated places for worship, or the personification of deities of natural powers. Another interesting aspect of Elamite culture was a great respect for women. They are represented as equal in art, and queens are shown as equal to the king. This cultural trait would be preserved later in the position of women in Persian societies. In an earlier era, Elam was frequently invaded by its more powerful neighbors from the plains, which was more populous thanks to highly advanced irrigation systems. In fact, Elam is the loser in the first ever recorded war, with the invasion and looting by the Sumerians of Elam in 2700 BC. Susa would also be under Sumerian control, under the rule of the legendary Sargon of Akkad. But nothing lasts forever. and by 1100 BC, Elam was the rising power in the region. King Shutruk-Nahunti went on a series of conquests, rolling over most of the cities around Babylon. Later, Elam would stay powerful, but would fail to rule the region due to infighting between the heirs of King Shutruk. The king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, would in turn conquer Elam in 1120 BC, illustrating the difficulty in obtaining a lasting victory in the region. We know Elam was trading with the whole known world, and not just its neighbors. We found in Susa plenty of artifacts from the Hindus Valley civilization in modern-day Pakistan. We also found objects from eastern Iran and Afghanistan, showing the existence of an active trade network, both by boat and by land. Afghanistan was also one of the major sources of tin, an essential metal to make bronze, the most advanced metal of the period. No doubt, Elam must have been involved in that trade and maybe resold tin from the east to the Mesopotamians, or even the Egyptians. They were also selling stone, metal, and wood that was lacking in the more desertic plains, crossed by the Tigris-Euphrates river system. This trading road would keep getting more and more important, and slowly involved in the Silk Road, connecting Europe to Asia, with Persia as the connecting point between the two. Progressively, Elam's power faded with the entry of the Iranian or Aryan people into the region. They were nomads who originated from the steppes of Eurasia, living a life similar to proto-slaves, Turks, and Mongols. Over time, Elam and Iranians started to mix, especially in the south of the country. This was a gradual process that stretched over more than a millennium, starting in 2000 BC. Elamite culture would persist long after the Iranian people became dominant in the region. For example, the Elamite language was for a long time used as the main administrative language. This would indicate that if the Iranians ruled and colonized the area, the legal and administrative system was still manned by native Elamites. One of these Iranian groups, the Medes, started to federate the region under the banner of the first real Iranian emperor, Deioces, who reigned from 727 to 675 BC, according to Herodotus. To give you an idea, the highly embellished tales of the 300 Spartans fighting Persia were from Herodotus. So, while important, Deioces might not have actually been the ruler of the whole of Iran. In any case, the Medes' unification was in large part a reaction to the brutal conquest and oppression by the Assyrian Empire. Deioces' grandson Cyaxares would ally with the Babylonian and destroy the capital of the Assyrians, Nineveh, in 612 BC. By 700 BC, the area was mostly populated by Iranian people, like the Medes, Persians, and Parthians. The Medes might have been the founder of the first Iranian Empire and the downfall of the Assyrians, but it would be another group that would take the lead of the region. The Persians, under Cyrus the Great, would form the first Persian Empire, also called the Achaemenid Empire. Cyrus the Great was a vassal of the Medes that rebelled in 553 BC, and then went on to conquer the world. By 539 BC, he had conquered Babylon. In 533 BC, he would enter in India and conquer the western part of it. We don't know much about him before he went on overthrowing the Medes and taking over the whole Middle East. It seems he started his rebellion when a Medes general, Harpagus, was sent to attack Cyrus. But instead, Cyrus and Harpagus teamed up on the Medes Empire. How did that happen? What did Cyrus promise Harpagus? No one really knows, as the stories of the time, including from Herodotus, are too full of mythology and inventions to be relied on. But we know that later Harpagus would become one of Cyrus's top generals. Who knows? Maybe Harpagus saw early in Cyrus the great ruler he would become. So what made Cyrus the Great? First, he unified the Iranian people into a structured and stable empire. He created a central administration with governors called satraps. Most of the contemporary sources agree that they managed their domain efficiently, to the benefit of the common people. It also helped that satraps were regularly checked by the king's eyes, a network of spies reporting directly to Cyrus. The empire also had 4 capitals, reflecting a large level of autonomy for each region. Still, the center of the administration was at Susa, the old Elamite center of power. It relied on an advanced post system, where couriers would always find fresh food, water, a bed, and horses at a maximum of 2 days of travel. The system Cyrus created would be kept almost identical by successive empires and invaders until the Muslim conquests a millennium and a half later. His influence on legal work has reached so far in time that Thomas Jefferson read Cyrus's biography by Xenophon, the Cyropedia, as one of the sources of inspiration for the United States Declaration of Independence. Secondly, he's the king that conquered Babylon in 539 BC and allowed the Israelites to leave Babylon, where they were enslaved. For the Hebrew Bible, this was a task Cyrus had been appointed to by God himself. This made Cyrus the only non-Jewish figure in the Bible praised as a Messiah. Third, Cyrus was known to respect the culture and religion of the people he conquered. He is considered by Iranians as the Father. He was considered by Babylonians as the Liberator, which says a lot about his style of ruling compared to the old Babylonian elite. Fourth, he was the founder of the famous military division of the 10,000 men called the Immortals, which would stay the elite force of the Persian Empire to the end. Overall, as far as conquerors go, Cyrus was indeed a pretty good one. He created what at the time was the largest ever empire, and did it with a relatively limited amount of bloodshed and sparing civilian and local temples. His son would continue the tradition and conquer Phoenicia and Cyprus in 525 BC, followed the same year by the conquest of Egypt, Nubia, and part of modern-day Syria. To this day, the empire founded by Cyrus is the largest of all the successive Iranian empires.